Hi folks, I'm the Bald Guy, and these are Bald Guy Basics. In a previous video, I was showing you how to oil your gun stocks to help maintain them and to deepen the shine. I also showed you how to remove dents from the stock, which was a great process, but it was imperfect in that when you have a dent that actually breaks the fiber of the wood or tears or cuts, you can't bring that out completely. You can bring it even so that it's level, but you still have a mark. And I made the statement that day, I said, well, I don't finish stock, so I'm going to have to be satisfied with this. Well, I've not been satisfied. So today I'm going to have to tell you after the fact how I did it. But last week I chose to see if I could improve the look of the stock on my little 1022. So I disassembled the weapon, took all the metal parts off, and started by sanding the product down. But before I describe the process, now it's not wet, but it's not dry, if you understand. This is where I've gotten to today. And just literally in the last half hour, I have stained my 1022. I spent days, let me hang this back up just a second here. I spent days in the sanding process, and I'm looking at, I've got a couple of uneven spots here, so I think I've got enough residual. Oh yeah, that worked. Got to be careful because I'll pull it off this hook. This hook is not, yeah, it almost came off. This hook is not as firm as I should probably be using. But I decided to sand this thing down and see if I could make a better looking stock. So I did what you're doing. I got online and I started looking at experts. So you need to understand, this is not an expert telling you how to do this. This is a novice who has just done his first stock. And as is my wont at times, I did it the first time without really educating myself, because for me, it's part of my learning style. I learn best by hands-on, and I also learn sometimes what to do by also learning what not to do. So I looked in my cabinet up here, and I had some Minwax wood finish. This is a red mahogany, and I sanded this thing off with the tools that I had, tried to do it by hand, which I learned. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the color came out, and I'll just show you on here. That was the red mahogany. Didn't like it, sanded the thing completely off. Then I went back to the hardware store and I got some colonial maple, which I thought was a little light. So I put some colonial maple on right here, and then took and just barely touched my red mahogany to, I was using a paper towel, and just wiped it on. This is just one of my picket sticks that I've used for so many projects. And I said, I don't mind that at all. That's more the sheen that I wanted, and this is unfinished, of course. And then what I did, I got, and I've told you before that these little dog food containers that are aluminum, wash them out, they make great little project cups. So I took and poured a mixture of my red mahogany and my colonial maple, and I learned from watching other videos, a great applicator is Scotch-Brite. So while I was at the hardware store, I just got a pack of Scotch-Brite, like you scrub pots and pans with no soap on it. And I mixed the two together completely by feel, just poured some in, and probably got it a little darker than I wanted, or at least that's what I thought, and wiped it on here, and was so pleased with the color that immediately I wanted to stain this unit that had been sanded. So let's back up and talk about sanding. First of all, I'm going to assume that you know enough about sanding that I don't need to go into the details of things like the various grits of sandpaper that you're going to need. There are other videos that will explain that well, but typically speaking, you're going to start with a rougher grit to remove the finish. And once you get the finish off, then you're going to go back with finer grits to polish it. The one thing I will tell you is, well, I'll tell you a couple things here. Number one, get you a power sander of some kind. When my father passed away, my brothers and I kind of divvied up his tools, and we took things that we didn't know if we would ever use. And I took his orbital sander by DeWalt. that uses I've got one of the old pads here. Uses, I believe these are 5-inch pads, 5 or 6-inch pads with the holes. If you don't know this, the holes are to allow the sand itself to escape, and most of those sanders have a suction device into a filter. Much cleaner, and I tried to do this by hand, and I just did not have the strength of hand and arm, or more particularly the endurance. I could scuff the surface, but I couldn't get it complete, and I didn't want to take 4 days to do this. I am a bit impatient. So I got the orbital sander out, made this thing much easier. I actually bought some more sanding pads. Used a couple of things I would do. I had a homemade dowel that I cut out of a piece of wood with my hole saw for another project. Wrap sandpaper around it to work in the curved areas. And the thing that I do a lot, here's an old piece of my 180 grit sandpaper. Rather than using a sanding block, which works just fine, but a lot of them are big. And because I wanted to work around the curvature, I've got some really thick leather here that's, it's pliable, but it's still pretty tough. Laid it on the back of my sandpaper so I could really put some elbow grease onto it. That worked really well. But there is a number of places where you're just going to have to do detail work. So you start with I started mechanically. I even used my belt sander to touch down in here. You got to be very careful because you can take off a lot of material and that'll get you in trouble. So after sanding it with the automation, with machinery here, then I went back with the finer grits and did a hand sanding job. The wonderful thing about your hand sanding job is, and I'll use the leather to illustrate, when I'm going around curved surfaces, I can curve my sandpaper. And so mechanically, I left streaks in here. I left flat spots. But when you go through with a final hand sand, you smooth out all of those things. I was paranoid about how this thing was going to look. And it's, by the way, it's not at all finished. I've learned a few other things. But I went with the finer and finer grit. This paper is 180, which gave me a good, fairly smooth surface. I've ordered some stuff that's even finer grit, but going with that at 180, I learned another trick. After that, ideally I would have liked to have finished off with some 220 or higher grit, finer grit, I should say. But I didn't have it at the time, and I went through a stack of sandpaper sheets, the square ones. I buy them bulk, until I was out, and I went and bought this stuff at Lowe's Hardware, and it's 3M. I will say this, when you buy stuff at the hardware store like this, it's much, much tougher. I don't even have, and I'm not going to go through the trash, some of the sandpaper that I had used, but it tore pretty quickly. Well, I say pretty quickly. When you're scrubbing with the strength I was scrubbing, I would have expected it to. But it tore in a matter of minutes, not a matter of seconds, so understand that. But I was kind of impatient, so I stopped after the 180 and didn't wait till the next order of sandpaper came in. But I learned from one of those online tutorials that if you have very fine steel wool, I have quadruple zero steel wool. I guess that's the finest grade of it. I did my final wood prep with steel wool, and it really does put a nice slick feel to the stock. Then went over the whole thing with a tacky cloth to get every bit of particulate off of it. Now, you've seen my videos. You know I'm in a cramped little shop here. Ideally, the professionals will say, you do your sanding in one shop and you do your staining in a whole nother area because of the sand itself, the dust. What I had to do was simply take my blower and just clean things off and let the dust settle. And then I used a hook so that I'm not on the table. By the way, get a good hook. I've dropped this thing 3 times because this hook is a little bit too flexible. That's why I'm not pulling on it. But here we are, and I've already cleaned it up. Here's what's left of my stain that I just found a little. That's an old spice jar from the wives' cabinet. But I mixed it, and literally, I mean, I don't know what size this thing is. It's 2 or 3 ounces. And I know it's really dark. The level is right there. And I did not have enough stain in here to fill this up. In this little tray, which is a 3.3 ounce tray, and that's by weight, I know, not by volume. But in this tray, I wasn't even halfway up the tray. And I was amazed how far the stain goes. So you don't need a lot of stain. These two things will do me a long time. And when you're using the Scotch-Brite, you know, it's porous, and you probably can't see it, but when I hold it up to the light, which is above you, I can see through this stuff. I can see light coming through. It's not like it's not like I'm going to spot something through it, but literally, I just touched it into my, I don't know if you can see that. I just touched it into one corner, and it took a while to spread that. That was so much fluid held by the Scotch-Brite. I was worried about, would it be streaky? Because this is a really coarse feeling material. But as you can see, and can I turn this without flipping it off? It did not streak. Now, if you see the dark spots here and here, what I did find after sanding and sanding and sanding, the oils from my hand, I told you, I think before, that this gun, I think I've had it since about 1990, 91, 92, somewhere in there. I've had the gun 30 years. And I didn't want to take more material off. So the darkness there is some oil that remained in the wood, and I just didn't want to alter the shape any more dramatically than I did. But let me take this down. If you saw my earlier video, hope you saw my earlier videos. Why would you not have seen my earlier videos? You will remember that right here, let me get that where you can see it. Right there was a major double dent. And all this, and if I turn it sideways where I can see the contours, there's a slight, I don't know if that's convex or concave, but a slight curve inward where I had to take so much material off in sanding. I didn't want to take that much material out away from it, so I chose to live with it. But here we are. Look at the grain that's already standing out. Now, I told you this is not done. And if you look here, you'll see some of the sheen of the wet sand stain that's not quite dry. So I'm going to hang her back up here, and we're going to leave it. But with no professional experience, and I tell people all the time, I wish it were different, but I'm not a craftsman. If you ask me to draw something, I'm going to draw stick figures because I just don't have that kind of artistic ability. Being impatient is a real liability when you're doing something like this. And yet, here I am having spent far fewer hours than many would spend, a lot more mistakes, a pretty limited supply of equipment. In fact, I told you I used the Dad's orbital sander. I don't think I'd ever really used that. I might have gotten it out and plugged it in and just to see if it would work, you know, turned it on, turned it off. But didn't know how to use it. And no videos said to use it for this kind of thing, but I just couldn't move enough material by hand fast enough. That worked wonderfully, and it cut down by hand. It's amazing the amount of sand and dust that you will produce. Even on this old piece of cloth there, you see how much dust is on that, and I've tried to clean that off. So having the right equipment cuts the time investment down. And what we will do, the next step, and I'll try to video that for you. The next step in the finishing process, I'm going to let this dry completely. So that means I'm going to have to let it dry overnight. I can touch it now and not leave a fingerprint, but it feels a little damp, I guess. Oh, and by the way, let me give you another trick. When you are sanding and you have raw wood, you need to angle it and move it in the light, and that will reveal places that are not smooth or properly blended. But a great trick then is just to take a shop rag, a cloth, a clean one by the way, and dip it in some water and just wipe it over until you'll see the stock change color. And as it changes color, you will see imperfections. You will see if there's an area that's a little more stained than you want. You'll see how much it stands out. So those are nice little tricks. But what we'll do after letting this dry is I'm going to go back across this with some True Oil. True Oil is an oil, it's not unlike boiled linseed oil or some of the other oils that are commonly used for this kind of thing. But True Oil works really well with gun stocks, and I can't tell you why. I don't know what the difference is. But I'll go with that True Oil. Well, before I do that, once this thing is dry, I may touch over it with that fine steel wool once more, just to get any fuzziness that has bubbled up from the staining process. And you'll feel it if, and it's just part of the process. But I'll smooth it back down. I'll go over it with a tacky cloth again, and then I'll start oiling it. When you oil this, that's when the grain really pops out and shines. That earlier video when I showed you to oil your stock with boiled linseed oil, it showed an immediate enhancement of the grain, and I did it with this particular gun, so that's why I wanted to use this one for the follow-up videos. So we will oil that and let that dry, and then oil it again and let that dry, and oil it again and let that dry. And by the way, it's very nice if you're worried about having an oily gun. These natural oils really do dry well without leaving an oily film. And remember, they're not petroleum-based oils, which is one of the reasons it doesn't leave that oily film. But with no major equipment besides Dad's orbital sander, I've been able to do this. And I've been able to do it in a very reasonable amount of time. Yes, you're going to have to learn a little patience. You can't do this in 15 minutes. But it doesn't take 15 hours either. So I'll end the video for this segment, and then I'll come back tomorrow and try to oil this in real time and let you see that first application. And then we'll decide whether we want to wait a couple of days while I make some more applications and then show you the final product. But it's not as hard as I imagined. Being non-artistic, I'll just tell you, I'm quite pleased. There were a number of places where I sanded and sanded and sanded, and I would see little speckles of color where the previous stain had penetrated that deeply into the grain of the wood. And I took off more material, and those pores stayed dark. So I was a little concerned for that. There was a couple of places that were like freckles. There were spots of stain. And now that I'm looking at it, and I'm going to move rather than moving this, like I said, I have dropped this. I am super pleased with what I've been able to accomplish, because this thing already looks better than when I started it, even after I oiled it on the previous time, because I've gotten rid of so many little dings and creases and indentations, and especially that bad one here on the side. It's gone now. And I'm really looking forward to putting this back together. So if you have something like this, it's really nice, especially, and I'm at that age where I've got a grandson, and he's not old. I'm not going to have him shooting yet because he doesn't live with us. And this is, gun education is a daily thing, not a one-time thing. But I am looking down the road to the time when he just turned 6. You know, when he's 7, 8, 9 years of age, I hope to be able to take him to a safe location and help teach him the fundamentals in the beginning. And one of these days, when I'm a little older and he's a little older, some of these things will be handed down to him. So that's kind of my long-term strategy here. So we're going to stop for today, and I'll come back tomorrow and we'll see how the oil makes a difference. Well, I'm back, and it's day 2 of our refinishing project. I want you to see where we're at now. I am super pleased simply because I expected worse, seeing that I'm not experienced at doing this. And so far, with just a very couple minor and very acceptable exceptions, I feel like this could be a factory stock. What I've done since our last meeting, I actually took this and hung it on the far side of the basement, down there where my wood stove is. We keep a pretty low fire overnight, and I always keep a fan blowing across the wood stove, so I set it, and it really helped the thing to dry. To know if it's dry, now there's some oily spots on here, but here. What I did last evening, you see those stains? I just wiped over this thing because it was mostly dry, but I was getting a little bit of color off, so I realized it wasn't dry and left it overnight. Now, one of the things I did not do and perhaps should have done is to seal the wood. What happens when you put any moist solution on wood that has not been sealed is the grain will rise. And if you remember yesterday, I said something about it, you could feel it being a little fuzzy. So before I actually started the camera today, I took my Scotch-Brite, took a clean Scotch-Brite, and just wiped over this. It is, in effect, sanding. I also used some quadruple alt steel wool and went over there. Didn't scratch it, but it takes it back to a very smooth feel to the wood. You don't feel that fuzziness. And every time you do that, you need to take some kind of clean cloth and wipe the particulate down. But again, since we last talked, since our last video, which was yesterday, I've done some more research, and I found, well, let me tell you what I'm after. In terms of a color scheme, I like this just fine, but I love a deep luster, a deep shine on my old guns especially. And I found out one of the ways to do that. I always thought that, and I guess some guns do have like a polyurethane coat, but the real deep shine is an oil finish. So rather than just oiling it straight up today and being done, or maybe 2 or 3 times the next few days, what I have done is taken my True Oil. True Oil is a blend of natural oils. It uses linseed oil with other additives. And one of the things it allows it to do, it allows the oil to dry fast. But a trick I saw yesterday that I thought really gave fantastic results, almost a mirror gloss on top. That's not a glassy gloss, I guess is a better way of putting it, is to layer my finishing approach, my oil approach. So what I've done, over there behind me, you may see it and you may not, it's a can of what's called paint thinner. But there's paint thinner and there's paint thinner. Paint thinner is can have several ingredients, but not necessarily, because there are several brands, and anything that thins paint can have the brand name or have the descriptive name of paint thinner. But what I'm after is mineral spirits, which is a petroleum distillate, which, and that's as much as I can explain to you. It is a petroleum product that thins down oil-based paints and stains. So in my little mixing bowl here, and I can't turn it up for you, but I use a pencil since I'm wearing gloves. The whole thing is about that deep. So it's not even a fifth of this container. I mixed, by just guessing by golly, a mixture of paint thinner and my True Oil. Much less of this than there is paint thinner. A guesstimation 1/3 True Oil, 2/3 paint thinner. And I try not to throw old dishcloths and stuff away. This one's been around a long time, and it's got dropped into the washing machine when we had whites and Cloroxes. So it looks bad, but it's absolutely clean. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to apply this thinned layer of True Oil. And I'll give you my process. We'll thin it, I'll hang it, and allow it to dry. Then I'll go back over it with my quadruple alt steel wool. And again, letting that grain of the wood, if it's still there, to rise, and then I'll smooth it out. It'll dry. I'll probably do this process 2 or 3 times. And I'm not going to try to do all that on camera because I'm impatient. And then when I am satisfied with that, I'll start going with just pure oil, and we'll finish it with multiple coats of True Oil. Now, True Oil, it's nice to be able to spread this. You can spread it with anything you want, but a great way to spread it is with just your finger, not even with gloves. Now, I do have gloves on today, but because I've got the mineral spirits, they're not going to hurt me. But it's just easier to keep it off my hands and stuff. So after that, I'll take true oil, and it takes such a little amount. I'll put it on my finger and just rub it into the wood. That way, not only will I spread it, but the heat of my hand warms the wood, warms the oil, sorry, and the oil will spread better. And the thing you're looking for as you spread it evenly over the entire stock is when this stuff starts to feel a little tacky. It's time to put it down and dry it. So just to see how significant the results are, let's begin. Now remember, at this point, I'm not after color. Oh my goodness, look at how that grain is standing out down here on the butt of the stock. I'm not after color, I'm after gloss. And of course with this washcloth, we're applying this very, I don't want to say conservatively, but it's not a heavy mixture because, as I said, it's more thinner than it is oil, but it's got some oil in it. So we're allowing that oil to seep into the pores of the wood and to really set off our grain. One of the things you want to be really careful to do here is to get 100% coverage. You want to, I don't care if you go over it 2, 3, 4, 10 times in terms of this particular coat. You want to be sure that you got a moist coat on every piece of this wood that is finished. Switch my hand here to the other side. So I'm really working around the top here where the barrel will lay into the wood, around the trigger guard, around the hand grip, or anywhere where it's curved. I had a lot of trouble sanding the end of the forearm up here. There's a barrel band that goes around it. Now, to tell the difference, you're going to have to back the video up and look at it before we started this. I'm just going to go over this again to make sure I've got a good coat, especially around the edges, around my cutouts. And you'll notice it's already dried up here where my hand is. It's probably not the best technique to have my hand on it, but that's one of the reasons I have gloves on. Gloves prevent the oils from my skin from interacting with the stain and the oil finish. And I've got something to show you here in a moment. One of the things I did yesterday is, ooh, slid off. I'm using a sandbag, but you can use towels or other things. One of the things I did yesterday in the afternoon is I took one of my old .22 rifles that I had never taken to the range. It's, when I say it's old, it's not old to me. I've not had it that long. But the rifle itself was built, I think, in 1938. By the way, you can still sand the stock with really fine grit sandpaper between these applications. As I'm looking down this way, I don't think you'd ever see it looking on this way, but I can see some ripples where my sanding was not 100% even. So after this, I give this a few hours to dry. I can go back and touch that up with some talking like 1000 grit sandpaper if you happen to have any, or the steel wool. And you can help blend things in. But you see what I'm doing? I'm making sure that my coverage is even, that there are no runny spots. But I want you to look at the grain on top there of how it stands out, and on the bottom as well. It really starts to dress that up. So what I want to do here, before we end the video for today, is to show you at least a little bit of what I'm shooting for. Pardon me just a moment. I wanted to put these side by side. This is a gun with a stained oil finished stock. 1938, so if it was 1940 to 2024, would be 84 years plus 2 more. So 86 years old, this weapon. And by the way, it still shoots groups that are just fine, and that was with open sights. Blind boy shooting groups like that is not disappointed at all. So what we're looking for is to get this deeper sheen, and in fact, by doing this process repeatedly, I'm hopeful that we can actually get something of a glassy finish. So it's just a process that requires a little bit of patience, a lot of elbow grease. Now, I can't turn liquid up, but I've used almost none of this. So what I'm going to do is I'll lay something over the top of this to kind of prevent the mineral spirits from evaporating. And I will probably, as we go along, I'll drop a little bit more of my true oil into this. If you don't have true oil, but you do have boiled linseed oil, you can do that. That works just fine. True oil the additives are intended to keep the oil from yellowing or decaying. So it's a really excellent finish for a firearm. So where we're at, it'll dry now. I'll go back and I'll use my steel wool. I don't have any 1000 grit sandpaper, I don't think. If I find some, I'll do that. I'll go over it and I'll slick this down between the process. So sand it or buff it. Then I'll wipe it to get particulate off. Then I'll reapply our thinned material for a couple of more coats. And then when that's all said and done, we'll put our final full 100% oil coat on there. And that also will be something that I will apply 2 or 3 times. And I'm not going to waste your time watching. I know I ramble, so forgive me for that. I'm not going to waste your time watching each and every process. I'm just going to end today's video, and we'll jump ahead and try to show you the final product and see if you appreciate the results. So hang with us, and for you it'll be just a moment. For me it'll be a day or so, but we'll see what kind of results we can produce. Well, we're back, and I must admit that I have exhibited my impatience. Yesterday when I finished with you, I was putting on coats of a mixture of True Oil by Birchwood Casey and mineral spirits, about a 2 to 1, 1 part oil, 2 parts mineral spirits. And that's a very generalization. I thinned it down, and what I did, and here it is. I used one of my handiest little things for a temporary mixing bowl or something. These are little dog food bowls. I just washed them out after the dog's done with them. And I put a very small amount in here, but it goes a long way. So what I did during the day, after I turned the video off, I would wait an hour or 2. The oil dries pretty quickly, and I would come back and reapply it. And then as I got lower in my container here, and I must have done this 4 or 5 times, but the last time or 2, I put a little bit more True Oil to darken the mixture and did that. And then when I'm done, I let that dry very well. And last evening, I came down here and just put my True Oil directly into my pan after I cleaned it out and applied it with my finger. I made 2 final coats of just oil. And between the coats, I used my Scotch-Brite, I used my quadruple aught steel wool, and I found some ultra-fine sandpaper. It's somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 grit. And what I did is I wet sanded the finish. You did not see any real clouding at all, but what that did is take care of any particulate, any bubbles that were in this. Now remember, this is my very first effort at refinishing a stock. But when I got the thing to last night and saw what it looked like, I just had to put the rifle together. Just kind of showing you what the results were. The worst place that I found is right along there. I had just a little bit of a run, which again, that can be rectified, but it is so minor. I didn't really care. This thing has turned out far better than I hoped for. I've told you, I am not a craftsman. I have no special skills. Now, I want to give you kind of a rundown of the equipment that I used. In terms of supplies, that is stains, oils, those kind of things. Most of this stuff I had in my cabinet. I had the red mahogany stain. I had the True Oil. This True Oil I know dates back to 1996 or 7, somewhere in there. So we're talking 25 years, 26 years, maybe more. I did buy the maple stain. I forgot maple something. But I mixed 2 stains to get the color that I want. And if you didn't see my earlier video, I tried each of my stains and then I tried mixing them. And this is on an unfinished piece of wood, so I didn't even sand this just to get a color. But what I was after, I like a sheen on my finished stocks. So the guns I've bought over the years, I'm a sucker for a bright, high gloss finish. I just think it looks the way, it's almost artistic. It gives the look that, and this goes back to, I guess, my childhood. I was born in 1965. I have an older brother, or had an older brother, he's passed on, who was born in 1951. So as a kid, my first experience to hunting was when my older brothers took me. And even later, as I'm a teenager, he's deer hunting and doing those things. And he had this beautiful Winchester bolt-action BDL rifle with the high sheen. And I just thought, that's the way a gun ought to look. So when I decided that I wanted to do something with my Ruger, I'm looking online just like you are to find ideas. And I realized from what I was watching, I could do this. A bottle of True Oil, let's just add it up. On Amazon right now is somewhere around $11. If you have Amazon Prime, that's free shipping, $10.98 or whatever, and it will vary. The small cans of stain I got at big box stores, whether they be Lowe's Hardware or Walmart or wherever, but those are $6, $7, $8 a piece. I've had one here for a couple of years. I used it in my knife making, and I bought another one. So let's say I bought both of them. If they're $8 a piece, that's $16, and $11, that's $27 that I've spent. And again, this will last for a long, long time. I've treated all my rifles. Well, not all with True Oil. I do use plain boiled linseed oil, which is very similar. This says it has a unique blend of other elements, but are all natural, so they don't have to tell you. But just by wiping that on, and I hope you can tell by my hands, there's not a bit of wet or even tacky feel to this. And I just did this yesterday. So sandpaper, I had sandpaper around here and used most of it. I did tell you that I ordered some more of these from for the orbital sander. I ordered a box of, I don't know how many, 6 or 8, for $5 and something, again, offline from online sources. So I've literally got, if you count the fact that this is 26 or 7 years old, I didn't spend anything for this, or I spent much less. I already had one of my stains here, so I only bought one bottle of stain at $6, $7, $8. I forget what it was. And I sent off for some sanding pads, so you got to have sandpaper. But my point is, if you have some kind of power sander, a palm sander, an orbital sander, or even, you can use a belt sander, but it doesn't get into the corners as nicely as you should. I've really spent nothing for a job that someone else would have charged me $150 or $200. So for a novice to be able to do this first time out, I just find I've impressed myself. That's not really hard to do. So this is the results. Of all the videos I've done, I am far more proud of the final result of this one than any other video I've done. I want to show you one other thing before we're gone, so I don't want to do a separate video. I keep a lot of, let me get a clean one, a lot of pieces of leather, and this one's not clean. So I cut, let me tell you why. This gun is short. This is the throw for me when I put it to my shoulder, and I'm cramped. I'm not exaggerating. This is the size of it. So for years, I'm throwing stuff around here. For years, what is stuck to this? I used a shotgun recoil pad that simply, it's a sock that slides over, and it adds about this much to the length of the butt of my stock. But it wasn't enough. So what I did is I took leather and I cut it out to the shape of this, and I made a stack. Now, before I show you my stack, the back of my gun is curved. So I simply stacked them together, glued, and when it was done, I sanded off the back of this thing to roughly fit the shape of my gun, slide it into my stock, my sock, I should say, and now I have added close to 2 inches to the length. Slides on the back of the gun, so if you don't see the cutout I made on the bottom to let the sling lug slide into the sock, now a perfectly removable, just pull it right off, but this rifle now has a big boy feel, and very easy to make alterations like that make quite a difference. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it gives you reason to think. I'm looking here, and our basement is it's overcrowded, to say the least. But we have old pieces of furniture here from the previous generation, other members of the family, and I never realized that what a finish you could put on something simply by rubbing oil on it. The oil soaks into the surface itself, and then the fluid part of it evaporates, leaving a wonderful sheen. And that is something that any of you can do. If you're not as interested in gun stocks and you're doing other oil, let me highly recommend just boiled linseed oil. I am told the difference between pure raw linseed oil and boiled linseed oil is the processing allows it to dry quicker. Raw linseed oil takes days and days and days to dry for that sticky feel to be gone. This dried in a matter of an hour or two. So that's it for today. I'm thinking all the time of, and hold on. Just a last comparison. There is the stock color that most guns came in for years and years. And by the way, if you didn't see, I guess I told you in my earlier video that's going to be part of this one. This gun's 1938. I absolutely love this little 22. This is a Remington 550. But notice how much more muted the grain. You can see the grain, but it really stands out in when you've refinished. So that's why to do it. Now let me make a final. Let me make a final warning. If you are not a gun person, I am told that if you refinish a stock, if you re-blue a barrel, if you do any alterations to a gun from its original condition, that it loses its so-called street value. Not street, but it's fair trade value, especially a collector's item. So you need to determine for yourself if why you're doing this and what you want to do. I don't do this for investment value. I did this because I had a gun that I had used for 30 years and there were some dings on it and I wanted to see it prettied up again. So just be careful if you have grandpa's old whatever that was handed down to you and it has some significant value to it on the old gun market. You really want to talk to someone before you want to do any alterations. If monetary value is your number one concern. I've got the things I've got put up are not for sale. They're for grandkids down the road. My kids or grandkids. So that's why I do it. But I just wanted you to be aware that this gun, when I bought this gun, a 1022 new was anywhere from $100 to $149.95, depending on where you bought it, when you bought it, if it was on sale. This gun, I've not checked, so I'm not an expert, but the last time I saw one, the list price was around the $300 range, $250 to $300. So let's say today, at today's prices, $300 for the sake of math. This alteration, in the eyes of a trader, somebody who is, whether they're at a gun shop or at a flea market or whatever, oh, that gun's been altered. They say it cuts the value in half. You know what? They can say anything they want to. I would not let this go for less than its full value. And like I say that, and that's an empty statement because I'm not looking to sell it. But if I were, I've done enough of a job here that I have no shame in saying, yeah, that's been redone, and doesn't it look great? So for me, this gives an everyday plain Jane little 22 rifle a unique appearance, a measure of satisfaction, and yes, even quality that says you can't just go to the store and get one like this. So that's, for people to tell me, well, that cuts its value. Well, I have a deep philosophical phrase for you: hogwash. That's the kind of things that traders say to get a deal. And I've noted this about traders. When they get a deal because it's not worth what somebody says it was, when they turn around to sell it, guess what? They say, look, this has got a custom stock on it and it looks great, and their price goes up. So be careful you don't fall for that kind of stuff. So I'm rambling, so I'm going to stop today, but I am so happy. If you do this, you can repeat the oil coat however many times you want. Another thing I saw as I was doing my research, you can expedite the process of getting that deep luster if you have like a buffer for your drill with a clean cotton or felt pad or even wool. You can buff in a deeper shine, but every layer just gets glassier and glassier. And I am super pleased. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you on the next video. Remember to leave us a like, to leave us a comment, a suggestion if you would. I hope you have subscribed to the channel, and I hope you'll share these videos with others who share similar interests. And you, of course, can find these videos cross-posted over on our Facebook page at Bald Guy Basics. Hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.